Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the webinar, Prevailing Through Disruption with the Rapid Adoption of Technologies. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to attend. My name is Ed Diamond, and I'm the Vice President of Business Development here at Core Competence. I noticed that we have a diverse mix of attendees today from across multiple industries, including manufacturing, nonprofit, power systems, oil and gas, marketing and advertising. So that's really exciting. That's really great. Thank you so much for attending. Moving on. All of us recognize that this pandemic that we are currently in comes once in 100 years. It's a once in 100-year kind of event. And it came quickly, without warning, and it's disrupted businesses across the globe like never before. But the question we ask today is, how can businesses respond to prevail through this disruption? And how can they also lay the foundation for quicker growth once we are out of this pandemic? So that is the theme of this event. In terms of our panelists, I'm going to have a group of panelists here that are very highly qualified to answer these questions that we've raised. But before that, I'd like to introduce you a little bit to the company, Core Competence. So Core Competence is involved in technology transformations for our clients. And we do this from end to end across their organizations, across various areas. And we do this at compelling return on investment for our clients. We've been in existence for over 15 years now, and we have over 250 clients that we service across the globe. Over 80% of our business comes from US and Canada. And we have over 250 clients that we service across the globe. Moving on to the next slide, we talk a little bit about our services. As you can see, digital growth has to do with everything that engages the customer. So everything to do with web, mobile, customer portals, marketing automation solutions comes within that bucket. And digital operations is everything that's going to empower our customers and enable their digital operations. So that covers everything from ERP, CRM, enterprise security, cloud operations. All of that falls into that bucket. And digital transformation, and these are, digital transformation projects are ones that take your automation to the next level. That involves robotic process automation elements, artificial intelligence, and analytics that can provide you with actionable intelligence. So those are some of the areas that we operate in. As you can see, it's many of our customers see us as a one-stop shop for the reason that we're able to work across multiple areas in their organization and bring all those pieces together. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists to you. First up is going to be Christian. Christian is going to be drawing some broad themes about this disruption and how organizations are experiencing this acceleration of digital transformation that they need to do to cope, and what they can do to cope and prevail in such an environment. And then he's going to hand over to Abby. Abby has over 20 years, over 50 implementations that he's done in ERP and CRM initiatives. He's also worked on multiple digital transformation initiatives, and he's going to walk us through how a store, a traditional store retailer had to move to e-commerce and how they handle that disruption and what are some of the elements they implemented there. And then we're going to go on to Manoj. Manoj is the Chief Technology Officer at Core Competence, and he is going to be talking about how customers are coping with moving to the cloud, moving to remote work, bring your own device, BYOD implementations, security implementations, how customers are able to implement these in a very secure manner. He's going to be talking about that in more detail. So with that, I'd like to let you know a couple of housekeeping things here. You can ask questions through the panel provided to you at any time during the session. And at the end of our session, we're going to be taking up those questions to answer those questions. And all attendees will be on mute during the session. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Christian to walk over some broad themes of this disruption and how our customers and other companies are handling it. Over to you, Christian.
Thank you, Ed. I appreciate the introduction, and thank you again, everyone, for joining, taking time out of your busy day to talk about how the times are changing. At times, it seems like everything is even moving faster than ever, largely as a result of a new nexus of economic conditions and technology transformation, where we're seeing disruption in the economy and disruption with various technologies that we're going to cover in a little bit more detail on the next few slides. Again, thanks everyone for joining. This quote from Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella really tries to capture everything in a nutshell. In April 2020, he said on a conference call with investors that we've seen 2 years worth of digital transformation in 2 months. He was referring to the rapid growth of their Teams application, which Manoj is going to talk about a little bit later in the presentation. During this April 2020 period, Teams had over 200 million participants per day for around 4.1 billion minutes of online meetings. I'm sure many of you have heard of Zoom and similar technologies. They've all seen explosive growth since early March. This explosion of usage of online conferencing software cuts across pretty much all sectors: education, government, healthcare, and it cuts across all sizes of companies, large organizations like Accenture to smaller outfits like the Guildford Technical Community College. Teams is just the tip of the digital technology transformation iceberg, where billions of people across tens of thousands of companies were forced, quite literally overnight, to adapt to radically new conditions. As I mentioned, sometimes the world doesn't indeed change overnight, and you have to adapt or die, a concept that AB will be referring to a little bit later in the deck. The sad truth is that many businesses were forced to close by government mandate. Some of them are never going to open again. According to estimates from Yelp, that number runs about 72,000 businesses permanently shuttered. Other businesses have been allowed to continue to operate, but under restrictions and dramatically different conditions than they were used to. This is both within the business itself and in the larger economic environment. This has led to the percentage of remote knowledge workers working remotely doubling in 2 weeks. This represents millions of people across tens of thousands of companies suddenly working in a completely different way than many of them ever had before. Even for businesses that were allowed to continue their operations, day-to-day life was very different for many workers. Things like face masks, social distancing, plexiglass barriers, if not even real-time temperature checks or questionnaires upon entering an office, were the outward signs of what was happening. But inside, businesses were struggling as well in some of the more intangible, non-visible areas. First, it's obviously difficult for a business to operate if your customers are closed. I'm sure we've all seen a range of issues like I have on the screen right now, and perhaps many more, from lost customers to supplier challenges. And this doesn't even include some more intangible elements like employee morale, lack of collaboration, teamwork, and everything else that helps to keep a company healthy and thriving. Fortunately for many businesses, there was already a broad range of technology on the market that helped companies survive during this difficult period. Some were even able to prosper. Most employees, especially in knowledge industries, were at least somewhat familiar with how to work and function successfully remotely, Packages like Microsoft's popular Office 365 or Google's G Suite already included tools for document sharing, online meetings, chat, and similar features. But what about your customers? As your business was stressed, your customers still needed to be serviced. Companies that had deployed systems in this area had a bit of a leg up. They could perform basic tasks like receive service requests, issue invoices, track orders entirely online, often without the need for human intervention. This allowed their employees the freedom to focus on some more pressing issues. Other companies had already gone even a step further. They were making money online, which is an absolute huge boost when your sales team can't hit the road or your physical offices and stores are shuttered. These businesses, whether they were B2B or B2C, had the opportunity to keep on growing. And in many cases, they were able to take orders from the competition, companies that didn't have a successful e-commerce plan. Ultimately, it all comes down to business continuity. What does it take to keep your business operating under even the most difficult conditions? The answer is going to be different for each type of business, but at a minimum, you need to have the systems in place to make sure your employees can keep doing their jobs and your company can keep selling its products. Technology is one of the reasons companies are able to stay successful and why companies are increasing their investment even in tightening economic conditions. Technology has become the key enabler for most businesses. 70% of them in a recent survey plan to increase their investment from an already pretty stunning $1.2 trillion last year. Perhaps even more telling, people that cited worsening economic conditions as a concern were 20% more likely to report an increased spend. These stats alone should probably tell you something. If your business isn't investing in its systems and platforms, you're not likely to be prepared for the future. Especially when the future is only promising to be more disruptive than the present. We live in an era where core technologies like AI and Internet of Things are just beginning to go mainstream. There's going to be a wide variety of technologies from renewable energy to medical innovations that come online over the next few years. This chart from Gartner shows a bit of what is in development, along with their prediction as to when it will come to fruition. Some, like 5G, are already being rolled out. Others, like delivery drones and testing, are in pilot phases. And some of them a little more than dreams of what the future might look like. But is there any doubt that there are going to be new things added to this list, technologies that no one has seen before, that suddenly become critical to your business? If you look at autonomous cars, for example, Gartner has fully autonomous vehicles coming online in a little bit more than 10 years. But 10 years ago, the idea of an autonomous vehicle at all was merely a dream. Is it possible that Gartner is wrong? I'm sure companies like Tesla and Elon Musk would like to think so, and it's going to be exciting to find out how this evolves over the next decade or so. This disruption is being fueled by continuous innovation in a few key areas. Machines keep getting faster, smarter, more connected, and more capable. Computer processing power still doubles almost every 2 years, a theory called Moore's Law, which has held true since the early 1970s. This means that our devices, whether they be desktop PCs, tablets, mobile phones, or something else, are likely to be orders of magnitude faster over the course of the next decade. Likewise, almost no one was talking about AI 10 years ago, but now many of us talk to our Amazon Alexas or our Google Homes almost every day, and they talk back. You have to wonder what these things are going to be capable of in the next 10 years, 20 years, or even 30 years. When the internet was started in 1993, most users still had to dial up to it. Now, almost everything and anything that can be connected has been connected, including ovens, refrigerators, even barbecue grills that you control from your phone. Autonomy, the capable computer with intelligent automation, is also in its relative infancy, but it's going to be one of the hottest areas over the course of the next decade, and we'll talk about that more in a moment. Capable and autonomous in this context means the ability for a computer to perform complex tasks without any kind of human assistance. For most businesses, this covers three key areas: marketing, your business processes, and the rapidly growing field of robotic process automation that Abby is going to cover in an upcoming section. Together, these technologies help your business run 24/7, from sending out marketing messages to your customers to ensuring your proposals move smoothly from inquiry to contract signing, your customer service requests are processed on time, and even more. How fast is this switch to autonomy and capable computers happening is an important question. According to the World Economic Forum, about 1 billion jobs will be replaced by autonomous technologies and robotics in just the next 10 years. That comes to 100 million jobs per year, and this is after we've already replaced somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of repetitive tasks with some kind of automation today. Clearly, the future is pretty bright for the consumer. They're going to get goods faster, higher quality, and more reliably than ever before. But the role of the worker and their relation to the employer is changing incredibly rapidly, and it's very difficult to predict what will happen next. Of course, every business is different, and we certainly can't tell you how to run yours on a 1-hour webinar, but we can say with absolute certainty that there are a few questions you are going to need to answer and a few plans you need to put in place. The foundation of this transformation strategy is your employees and their ability to service your customers. Many companies sadly operate like ducks on the water. They glide smoothly forward while frantically paddling underneath. At the same time, if your customers don't see this frantic paddling, you can likely buy more time to look more closely at your operations and make the appropriate investments. Some of the questions you should ask are your systems older than the last nice bottle of wine you shared with someone special? If that's the case, that's probably not a good sign, but age, of course, isn't the most important thing. You might ask yourself if you spend more time struggling with your systems than actually using them. For example, how often do you have to take care of a task manually, offline, rather than the system itself? You know, I'll download this as a spreadsheet, I'll create a pivot table, I'll manipulate a little bit, I'll work the numbers, and then I'll email it to a colleague or a customer. If that's a frequent occurrence for you, it's going to make it very difficult to digitize your operations, integrate your systems, and ultimately automate your transactions. Perhaps even worse, in the short and medium term, there's a good chance you and your employees spend a lot of time performing these kinds of tasks, and that's time that could be better invested in the future of your business, transforming it to prosper in the days ahead. The good news for forward-thinking companies is that there are a range of technologies available right now that have already been proven by large businesses to function at scale and be reliable, that are now coming down in price points, very attractive, and can really help your business. Whether you need to improve the customer experience, use data to better manage your business, even make predictions about your performance. Abby's going to cover some of these topics later on, as well as Manoj. But how about using AI to field customer service requests or sales inquiries before they even hit your staff? Technologies like this, called conversational artificial intelligence, are already readily available from Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Salesforce, and others. They can be set up quickly and effectively in the cloud, where everything is become service oriented and plug and play. These technologies are key to giving you more flexibility and scalability and allowing you to bring more to market faster. Ultimately, what you bring to the market is up to you, but new technologies like virtual reality and augmented reality are becoming mainstream and can help in certain areas. For example, AR in particular is already pretty important in the service industry, where technicians can use their phones or goggles to collaborate on an issue without even being there. While that might not apply directly to your business, chances are one of these practical technologies does and could be a key ingredient in your future. Thanks again for joining. I hope you enjoyed the introduction. At this point, I'm going to turn the floor over to AB, who's going to cover the microservice revolution and a few other important topics. AB, please take it away.
Thank you, Christian. Now you heard about a number of technologies. Let's look at examples of how these technologies are being used currently across various industries. Talk about the microservice revolution. Microservices is essentially breaking down monoliths. Now, several of you are used to large applications. We call those monoliths, and microservices are the opposite of that. Quote from Charles Darwin, 19th century: "It's not the strongest of the species, but those that are most adaptable, who can change, who survive." Now, as an organization, are you able to change? As your business models change, can you keep up? Let's look at the monolith. We talked about the large applications from large vendors, your ERP systems, your CRM systems, your HR systems. Now, these have something in common. They have user interfaces, they have data access layers or your databases, and your data is stored on disks and servers. Now, this is all running on a single platform. It's a single program, which means if you make a change to one area, you have to make sure that that change is not seen across other functions and modules within that monolith. So what do we do with these monoliths? Are the software vendors going to be able to keep up with our demands? Are you large enough that they're going to pay attention to you? So let's look at how we break down this monolith. So this is where companies, organizations such as yourself became creative and say, now let's break up the monolith, let's strangulate the monolith, and let's take out functions, whether they are a catalog service, whether they are about inventory, whether they are about my order statuses, and let me create smaller services out of them, right? So let's look at some of the components of the microservices architecture. Front-end microservices, right? This is where now, if you look at consumers or you look at customers, even if they are internal customers on the shop floor or in your warehouse, a lot of them are using various devices. There are mobile devices, there are tablets, there are RF devices. Now, how do you create a front end that can scale across devices, right? So that's the front end microservices. Then you have microservices for the business services. We talked about maybe an inventory service, which will beam the current status of inventory. How much quantity do I have on hand, right? Without affecting the whole application. That I can add more features to, right? That would be a business service that would be set up as a microservice. Interoperable microservice would be, that's the interoperability between, so the front end and now the business service are completely decoupled. From my front end UI, I can call the business service and get that information on a real-time basis. I can scale, I can go to 1 billion consumers for my front end, and my business service is going to scale. And that's the beauty of microservices, right? They are self-contained. They do not have any dependency on other applications or services. They are not dependent on an underlying server, which means they can run anywhere. If you look at your mobile devices, your cell phones that you're carrying around, the chips and the technology that's in your cell phones have more power than the servers of a decade ago. So that means that your phones are capable of running microservices. Your watches, your smart watches are capable of that, right? So let's look at the details. Now let me look at explain to you some samples of headless commerce. So in the microservices, we talked about the microservice, the front end microservice, which means we would like the logic of processing the order to be different from the user interface or the user experience. How do I separate that? I separate that by creating a nice interface, an API interface in between the front end and between the services that serve up data or content or a frame to my device. Now, there are organizations that have taken their e-commerce platforms and they have microservice enabled them. So we call that category headless commerce. You have them from Shopify, Magento, which is now acquired by Adobe, from Salesforce, and Microsoft Dynamics. I mean, Microsoft used to be in the realm of being that monolith, but they have listened to customers such as yourselves and said, how do we make sure that the customers are not going to have IT shops that are creating these products and services, but that we can serve up those services in a public private cloud environment where they can consume those services as a utility, right? So let's look at the applications of some of these technologies and vendor services at various organizations. I'm going to talk about e-commerce for a sports retailer, right? 250 stores, very brick and mortar focused, but look at the competition, right? Including Amazon is making everybody, every retailer, everybody in the retail space sit up and take notice. What's going to prevent Amazon from delivering the goods the same day or the next day, or maybe 2 days from today, right? Do I really need to go into a store to purchase that? Now, the retailer was saddled with the monolithic applications that we were talking about, right? And those are built on technologies that the customer cannot change. That can only be changed by the vendor because they sold you the application, but you do not have control over the underlying technology, right? And another aspect of this is the fulfillment. Customer can have a wonderful experience coming to your website or using your app on their phone and ordering something, finding and ordering. But if you are not able to keep your promise to the customer that they will get it the next day or in a couple of days from ordering, or that they can come to your store and pick up the product, then your supply chain is broken. And most of the time, the supply chain visibility is because of lack of automation in the systems there, right? So let's look at the how we achieve this. So we took that solution and created different pillars. We talked about the headless commerce, right? Basically, this is empowering business to really change the user interface, the user experience, to hyper personalize the customer journey, right? So as a customer, I'm treated like a customer of as a category of one. I'm unique because I shop certain products, I shop certain categories. I'm willing to share information with you so that you can then show me what really makes sense for me, right? So that entire headless architecture, microservices all over the place, not just front end, but if I'm a shopper and I'm shopping online and I'd like to go to a store and pick that up, I'd like to know that the inventory is going to be available for me and that I have the convenience of, if necessary, paying for that service or product online and then go and pick up when it is ready or when I am ready as a consumer. So that's the concept of the microservices cloud enablement. Now, when we looked at the different monoliths that were there, the state of operations, and what I mean by operations is the IT operations, it would be very difficult to put in a new technology in that particular operation that was built to service monoliths. So how do we innovate at the speed of business? How do we enable some of these technologies easily? And that's when we discovered that the cloud, public cloud, offers you those as platforms, as services. So why not cloud enable these applications? And business tools are very, very important, right? Because you do not really want to depend on IT for everything. If I need to create a new rule, a new price list, or a new user interface, I do not really need to depend on a UX designer or a programmer to make that happen. I should be able to create templates, test them out, and then have IT feed data to that template so that my screen now gets lit up with content and data that's relevant, right? So let's look at more details there. So what do we do? We made it future-proof, right? It's in the cloud. The cloud providers are forever updating and upgrading systems, so it is very future-proof. New technologies are brought to bear. We can, as a customer, you have the option of enabling the newer technologies. As your business moves, newer and newer technologies and ways of doing technology are available so that it is future-proof, right? We made it very cost-effective. Again, most of the cloud providers provide you technology that's open source and supported by them, which means you do not have to worry about the upkeep of those open source technologies, right? So it becomes very cost effective. You're not paying millions of dollars in license fees to large vendors. Cloud first for obvious reasons, right? It gives you flexibility, run anywhere, keep the cost down, move and be nimble. Mobile first. Now, obviously, the mobile is probably going to be the smallest form factor for your user interface. So if we can design something that's reactive, that can fit on your mobile device, then you can scale up, right? So let's start designing for mobile, and you'll find that consumers are using mobile devices more and more, right? Can it run anywhere? I should be able to run on my mobile device. We talked about that. I should be able to run it in the cloud. If I have space on-prem, on my on-premises data center, I should be able to run it on that. I should be able to run it on my laptop. So can it run anywhere, right? And also, if I have a consumer in, let's say, China or Australia, I like the microservice to run in a data center there, very close to the consumer, right? So I should be able to run this anywhere. Include AI in everything. And Christian talked about this, where you have AI and machine learning. It's becoming very practical in the past decade. Leaps and bounds of increase in innovation there, and further improved by way of the compute power that's available, right? So let's look at what happened, the results of that, right? The results were obviously budget savings. We talked about open source, API, headless commerce, not paying large licenses to fees to large vendors, because now I can scale. I can go from 1,000 consumers to 100,000 to a million, billion, does not matter, because I have the open source front end and I have these microservices. I can scale. And when I scale, I am not liable to pay large license fees. I'm paying for compute, right? But then how much of the compute do you use, right? Business growth, conversions. If you look at the consumers coming online and then either looking at the catalog and then finally purchasing something from this retailer's website was quite low. But with some of these technologies and by giving business the wherewithal to really create a very pleasing user interface, we were able to increase conversions, right? Operational excellence. I talked about inventory, for example. How do I know that the product is going to be available? How do I know if I'm picking for a consumer who's ordered online that that product is going to be available in the store, right? So again, operational excellence, and we'll talk about supply chain in a little bit more detail. Going on to the next technology, let's talk about RPA. A lot of you have heard about RPA. Is this really ready for prime time? Absolutely, right? So let's look at your robotic assistant. Bots have arrived. Really, if you look, when we talk about RPA, they have software bots enabled in the platform, right? So it's able to perform complex tasks. You have to train it, give it data and say, hey, if you see this, do this. And over time, the bot's also going to learn from you and is going to be your assistant, right? It can run in assisted or unassisted mode, right? So this is an example where imagine a payables department, large number of supplier invoices being processed, or customer onboarding, etc. Right? So those are some of the applications for robotic process automation or bots. And now let's look at some of the technologies that are out there. Right? Some of the sample robotic process automation platforms: UiPath, Blue Prism, Automation Anywhere, and Power Automate. I mean, these are a few that are available in the market, but just wanted to give you a sample of what's available in the market. Jeff Bezos, when he was talking about automation, now remember RPA is really enabling operational automation. When he talked about that entire space, he said, hey, it's not very visible, right? It's happening in the back end. But a lot of the machine learning, and we talked about the bots learning, right, is really quietly happening, but very meaningful because it's improving your operations, it's automating your operations, right, helping you to be much more smart about operations. So let's look at how this is being applied at a consumer packaged goods manufacturer. Large number of paper invoices from suppliers, smaller suppliers, again, a lot of overseas suppliers who are not very digital savvy. How do you serve them? Exceptions are more the rule. So instead of really having a pattern in those invoices, every invoice had a problem. So how do you solve that? And make exceptions real exceptions, and not that 90% of that are exceptions, right? It's a very time consuming. I mean, those of you who are in payables will know that this is a very time consuming manual process, entering invoices, correcting them, sending them for approval, making sure that they're coded to the right department, expense or capital, what have you, and then matching them for payment, and then processing for payment, making sure the check gets sent out to the supplier, or some sort of electronic payment, right? So how do you automate all this, right? So let's look at that. So the solution pillars for that, right? The robotic process automation we talked about. Again, several organizations are used to OCR, where you are scanning those paper invoices in, or these are coming via email and you're downloading and putting into a particular directory, and then some process is picking that up and presenting to you, and then you have to then take that electronic data and then key it into another application, right? But if you can use the computer vision API, which is an aspect of artificial intelligence, now you're giving the machine the intelligence to look at an image and then get data out of that. You can also train the imaging system, the vision system, to look for patterns and even correct them. Once you correct them, remember that the machine is going to learn, right? You have data architecture. Now you are using the data that's there to continuously train the robot workers on how to process these images, right? Image management. Now the image, once you bring that in and you have taken the metadata that's relevant to you out of it, you still need to store it somewhere, right? So we create an image management system so that it could be stored. And sometimes you might annotate the images, so we want to store all that information in an imaging system, right? And then development operations, right? So remember that this is machine learning, which means that your algorithm is continuously evolving over time. Now, as it evolves, we want to make sure that the workflows and the algorithms keep up with the demands of business, right? So basically automating the entire development and operations, very, very important, right? So what were the results? We had two types of RPA there, attended, which is essentially it's the robot that's assisting you. when you're entering information, looking at information, capturing the information, and that is, it's working lockstep with you. Unattended RPA was really for the invoice matching and processing, right? Because once you have the invoices in, you have extracted the data, you have added more data by way of the attended bots, then it is processed in the back end. So these unattended robots are in the back end looking at the purchase order, looking at the receipt, looking at the invoices, and matching different fields and making sure that everything matches. Maybe even in this case, we were putting on the account information also there, and also who it needs to go to, and routing it for approval to the person who, if approval was required, to the manager who was responsible for that, right? AI-powered computer vision, we talked about that, as opposed to having large scanners and printers. Most people, organizations are now questioning the need for large scanners and printers, right? And obviously the machine learning to make sure that the data ingestion and the rules are becoming much smarter, right? So this is what what the results of that was at the consumer packaged goods. Let's look at digital supply chain, right? We talked about real-time visibility of the supply chain as extremely important, right, in fulfillment. So again, some sampling. Remember I said real-time streaming. So what are some of the platforms available? Again, a lot of this is available either in the open source community or through public platforms that are cloud platforms, right, from Google or Azure or Amazon, etc., right? So let's look at an application of this. Tier 1 automotive supplier, large multinational operating all over the world, a big presence here in North America. Again, robotic process automation upfront, where imagine this, there's a supplier who is supplying to you, it's coming on a 18-wheeler coming to your warehouse. Now, this needs to be someone at the guard shack needs to figure out where this goes in your warehouse, which dock door to go to, and then they have to do the paperwork, enter some key in some information. Now, can you replace all that with a robot? Driver drives in, scans a document or appointment number on their device, and the robot is going to pick that up and assign them the dock door and even guide them to the dock door, right? Machine learning, again, to make all this automation happen and improve warehousing operations. Obviously, we were using machine learning in the back end. The trucks, when they are en route, making sure that they're beaming real-time information. Now, if you look at IoT, your mobile device, for example, is IoT and has all these technologies already embedded, right? All your mobile devices have GPS chips in there that someone can use to locate you, right? Streaming analytics, very important, right? Because now as you enable some of these technologies and these sensors, now you're going to have data that's being streamed to you every second, every minute, right? Even in microseconds. Now, what do you do with such large amount of data? Because you are not interested in putting that into a data warehouse and then doing analysis after the fact. So as the data comes at you, you want to make sure that you are reacting to that, right? So that's where the streaming analytics comes in, which is again supported by the machine learning there, right? So this was something we put in place for a tier 1 automotive supplier. Going to the next technology, virtual reality. Many of you are familiar with some of the virtual reality glasses out there, right? The Google VR, the Oculus, etc. Now, people generally, I mean, obviously, games is where kids use it, teenagers use it, but is this really ready for prime time? And believe it or not, people are using it, right? So let us look at some of the VR tools out there. And I say here sample BIM only because the BIM stands for Building Intelligent Information Modeling, right? So this is with specific reference to the construction industry. Those of you who are in the construction or large project construction industry will know that term, right? So look at some of the tools from Microsoft. Autodesk with their BIM tool, Iris VR, which really marries the lenses and the devices with the BIM tools out there. Oculus, which has recently been purchased by Facebook, because obviously Facebook sees a huge opportunity there, right? So let's look at an example of where this was done, right? Engineering and construction, right? Whether you are building a refinery, a petrochemical complex, or just a large, maybe a stadium, right? So you want to make sure that you can visualize this, right? Because especially those who are building plans, you create piping diagrams, and then you're trying to visualize that in 3 dimension. Can you really do that? Yes, you can, right? Because you already have the tools. You're probably using SolidWorks or Pro Engineer or all these other tools that you are already using for this kind of work. And can you store that? Can you simulate that? Can you do a what-if analysis, right? And then create training and standard operating procedures to reduce risk so that you can explain to your people how you can do that, right? So moving on, I'll hand this over to Manoj now.
Thank you, Abby. I'm going to talk about the virtual office. Every business nowadays is busy on getting into virtual offices, keeping their employees and teams safer, healthy, and productive. Working virtual is great, but brings us few hurdles to cross. Let us see what you need. In a virtual office, what all you need is a device, which is a computer or a tablet, and the collaboration tools. These are the default options for any virtual office. But now comes the more important ones, the compliance and the security. These are very, very important for every business, but most often overlooked. Going to the next one. Recently, we had one customer who came to us asking that they have enabled virtual office using the first 2 options and hoping that everything will fall in place because they know their customers and the employees much better. But quickly realized that there was a dent in the compliance and security. Since all this happened so quickly, there was not enough of laptops to be given to every employee, and shipping desktops is not an option at that time. So they requested the employees to use their personal computers as a stopgap, and this stopgap has made a dent in the compliance and security part of it. So when the customer approached us, we've implemented a tool called Microsoft Intune that's already comes part of the Microsoft M365 license suite. If you see, that's the cloud platform box, if you see on your presentation. So it helps IT teams to make sure all the devices are compliance and security aware for the company as per the company policies, and then make sure that they access the resources of the company securely. Next one. So that's how we help this customer to make their journey seamless. And of course, even though they had a few problems, all this has been patched with our efficient teams. Coming to the tools, as we talked about in the first slide, Microsoft Teams. Everyone knows that Microsoft Teams comes part of the M365 suite of products. But most users and companies think of it as just a chatting and a meeting software. But it does really more than that. It does document sharing, meeting people with outside of the organization as well. So we help customers implement that right way as recommended by Microsoft. In the next one, there's one more tool like that for document sharing and storing. There's always a confusion on the IT teams that why Microsoft has given 3 tools, a document storage / sharing via OneDrive, again a Teams, Microsoft Teams storage, and SharePoint as well. But if you really see and understand, there are definite reasons for having these 3 tools, even though they overlap in their features and functionalities. Going to the next slide. if you see, all these tools would provide version history, synchronization offline, online access, seamless access across devices, co-authoring. So these are the important features still safe on all these tools, but there is a place and time to use each of them. For example, OneDrive is only just for you and your documents. And then if it is for Teams, it will be within the Teams channel. Microsoft Teams is the right one. And if it is within the company, like a blasting across all the employees, then the intranet SharePoint is where the right place for these are. And the next one, bring your own device to work. So this is also getting more and more these days, for the same reason as I mentioned in few slides before. Getting a laptop to every employee in a short period is very, very tough. That's when bring your own device became more prominent. There are scenarios and other logistical reasons where giving a laptop also gets into a problem. So recently we helped one customer who want to get over this hurdle. We implemented again one of the Microsoft offered tools, which is called as Microsoft WVD, which is also full form of Windows Virtual Desktop, and implemented the remote desktop feature for all the employees who are not able to get a corporate device or a company device. And one good thing with this feature is that we can also have compliance in place. When Intune and WVD are implemented together, it's easier for us to make sure the compliance stays. I'll give you a small example. We have one customer who said any documents accessed from the shared drive cannot be printed on the local printers. So yes, we said the IT team can set that policy, say all the employees who are in the finance team or a HR team cannot print documents to a home printer. All this will be by default locked. So things like these can be achieved with these options available. Next one, these are some of the advantage of having Intune. And again, most businesses wouldn't know that it's part of the M365 suite of packages. It's just we need to apply and implement the right way. And it's not just for Windows. I mean, again, some have conception that it's only for Windows. No, this Intune works across platforms, Mac, smartphones, be it iOS or Android, and even tablets as well. We can secure all the corporate devices. And in fact, in few cases for our customers, we secure their personal device as well, of course, taking the coherence for the employee, because now they're using their personal tablet for corporate reasons. Moving on to the next slide. These are some of the key Intune features. One thing I would like to highlight is remote wipe. That's where most companies think, what do I do if the device is lost? So there is a feature in Intune where you can remotely wipe the device when it is lost. So next time when somebody opens up the device and connects to internet, the first command that executes is remote wipe. So all the company confidential data is wiped permanently. Moving on, here are the features that come with Microsoft WVD. As I mentioned, Windows Virtual Desktop. It not only helps people who needs a simple MS Office like Excel, Word, PowerPoint all day long. It also can be implemented for the employees who need high performance PCs like CAD/CAM, Adobe, Photoshop, InDesign, things like that, software like that. So this can help to provide use cases for all types of employees within a company. Next. Cloud is very, very important. Of course, all these are hosted on the cloud. There is no doubt about that. The advantage is moving your on-prem applications to the cloud will make the use of this Intune and the WVD more efficient. Okay, it can be used in your on-prem scenarios as well, but moving them to the cloud will get easier access and faster access. Next, if you see, we are seeing why the companies are migrating to the cloud. There were different reasons back then, a year ago, 2 years ago, but things have changed now. Apart from having the remote employees work seamlessly, they also need to do security and data protection and data modernization and cost as well. So these cloud platforms, be it Microsoft, Amazon Web Services, or GCP, sometimes comes in place with the security that is needed. Instead of buying all these heavy and high-priced appliances, moving to the cloud makes sense for these reasons. Even CFOs like this because their cost is now becoming OPEX instead of a CAPEX. Next one, as we mentioned, benefits of moving to the cloud is pay-as-you-go structure. You pay what you need. You need not buy a beefy appliances, be it server or small hard drive, whatever it is, heavily before, and keep it hoping that we might use it in the next 5 years, as that's the typical hardware cycle. Instead, use it as needed on the cloud. And one good example I'll tell you is the global operations. The advantage of cloud is we have one customer who came to us that they have offices across the world, and accessing from a data center or what they have in the US is always a problem. Then we said, why can't we use the global presence of the cloud, be it Azure or Amazon or GCP? In this case, again, we used Microsoft, where the services are running in the nearest data center of their offices, where the data access is faster and seamless, as if they are accessing the data from their server on premises. So we've enabled a distributed computing using the cloud services for this customer. Same again, security and productivity remains the same. The next slide is about the security threats we're having of late. If you see, you've been hearing that there is a company being hacked every few weeks these days. So let's take a simple example, the DDoS attacks. For an e-commerce company, DDoS is very, very important because that gets their website down. So by moving to the cloud, DDoS is by default included in the cloud services. So there is no extra measure need to be taken care by the customer, because the headache of having the DDoS safe website remains to the cloud provider. And we did that implementation as well. And the next one, if you see, the same thing I was talking about, the hackings are becoming prominent, and the security and compliance should be in place. That's the reason why going virtual office is easier, but we have to make sure it's done the right way. That is the most important in the current scenario. Coming to the next slide, what we have here is one more example of achieving security. So what we did is, we have one customer who came to us saying that, see, we have single sign-on, but are we secure enough? Yes, single sign-on is very good to secure enough, but we have to add one more layer called MFA, multi-factor authentication. So that will not only secure the access to a resource or a server or a web application by a password, but then the additional sign-on requirement joining it to a mobile device for secondary authentication is always a plus, so that the password misuse can be reduced a lot. If you see the Microsoft benefits chart here, they said they get return on investment 123%, data breach of 45% less, 50% in management cost, and 75% reduction of password resets as well, because everything is self-service. Next slide. Here is a case study where we did the entire hardware refresh for a nonprofit customer here in the US, where we have engineered all the cloud-enabled products for the nonprofit customer. And since it's non-profit, there are certain discounts that can be applied as well, so that their OPEX remains low. And we've achieved what a corporate can achieve for a non-profit as well. We are helping them since 2008, and we've been there through their cloud enablement journey as well. Next, I would give it over to Ed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manoj. Thank you, AB. Thank you, Christian. We have a few questions that have come in, so we will be delving into the questions. But before that, some closing thoughts. As you know, technology solutions are now available for you to handle the disruption that has come along with this pandemic. And these are solutions that you can implement quickly, especially, and smooth out some of the rough edges, especially the way your employees work remotely, or digital ways you can connect with your customers. So these are solutions that are available, and you can also start laying the foundation for the future. So you have that foundation to help you with digital transformation initiatives when things come back to normal. So with that, I'm going to go over a couple of quick questions. I think we're almost out of time, but this question, it relates to customer portals. It says, in your experience, how much time does it take to set up a customer portal, add some self-service features, and connect it to our back-end systems like ERP and CRM. So I'd like to hand over that question to Christian. Christian, can you take that question, please?
Thank you, Ed. Certainly. The specific answer to that question is going to depend quite a bit on the number of features and number of systems that you're integrating with. But generally speaking, we recommend using an agile methodology, microservices approach, as AB talked about earlier, where you launch the portal with a few key features, let's say access to invoices and access to orders, and or access to self-service support tools. If you keep the scope tight in phase one, you can be to market within 2 months, maybe 3 months. And then once the site is up, you can report on the usage. I was just going over some analytics with a customer who recently launched the portal too yesterday, in fact, and she was amazed at the number of people that were logging in. So once it's up and running, you just add new features over time and come up with a regular release schedule. So out of the gate within 2 to 3 months and then upgrade over time.
Great. Thanks for that, Christian. We have time for just one other question, and then we're going to close. The second question says, our employees that work from home do not have personal desktops and laptops that are powerful enough for business work. How does the virtual desktop solution address this? I'm going to hand that over to you, Manoj, if you can give us a quick answer there.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Thanks. Yes. So as we mentioned, there's two kind of employees what we encounter when we help our customers. One, employees who are willing to use their home computer as a corporate computer. And second one, an employee who says, no, there are multiple people in my home who use this computer. So that is where the second tier of employees is where we can use this virtual desktop option from Microsoft Azure, where nothing needs to be done to the PC or the laptop what he or she is using at home, and still it can be used by multiple family members, but able to access the corporate resources using the remote desktop available on the cloud. So that will help two things, as I mentioned again, being compliant with the company security policies and ease of access. The access can just be with a browser, and no applications are needed to be accessing it, nothing to be installed, easy for the IT team to manage. Hope I answered the question.
Sure, thanks Manoj. There's one more question that came in on e-commerce. So there's this the company says they have about 50 stores and a very small e-commerce footprint, and they're saying that what are the top 3 things that we need to do to make this transition quickly to an e-commerce environment. So I'm going to hand it over to you, AB, if you can quickly address that before we close.
Sure. Very quickly, 50 stores and going to e-commerce. If you already have a small e-commerce presence, you really want to, and the advice would be, our advice would be to go very quickly to a headless commerce type solution, where if you are fulfilling using a monolith backend, where you can really separate the two. And what Christian was talking about is very similar to the customer portal, where you can have a minimum viable product in place very quickly, and then add features for your customers over time in a very agile fashion.
Thank you. Thanks for that, AB. So I think we are out of time, and for questions we couldn't answer, our team is going to be in touch with you on email or speak to you on phone for your convenience to help address those questions. And I'd like to thank you all very much for attending once again. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar very soon. Bye-bye. Take care now.
Thank you.